بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. I apologize for that. We had a couple of technical difficulties. Inshallah they won't persist. So today inshallah we're carrying on with our lessons on Hanafi jurisprudence. Today we're going to be talking about ablution. One moment. So ablution, as we know in Arabic, is wudu. We have to do this before prayer. It's one of the conditions of prayer. So by the virtue of the fact that salah, which is fard, is impermissible except with wudu, then wudu itself also becomes fard. So the conditions for the obligation and validity of purification. So the conditions for the obligation. So imagine you're a mufti, and to be able to say to somebody that wudu is fard upon you, these are the conditions which need to be met. So the following are conditions by which purification becomes obligatory. 1, being a Muslim. So for a non-Muslim, wudu is never fard. Being legally responsible, that means to not be insane. Also, this means to not be too young. So basically past the age of maturity, bulugh we call it, because nothing for a child is fard. Being able to use purifying water, so to have the ability to use the water. Either the water is, so both the water needs to be accessible and you need to be in physically good health to be able to use the water for wudu. Being in a state of ritual impurity, you need to not have wudu for it to become obligatory upon you. Absence of that which prohibits purity, like a menstrual period or postnatal lochia. So you need to be free from anything that is going to stop, prohibit your wudu. So if you're currently bleeding in the Hanafi madhab, if you're physically bleeding at that moment, then you are unable to get wudu. So wudu cannot be fard upon you. Of course, there is a caveat to this, where if you're constantly bleeding or there is a situation where you are unable to get wudu for almost a whole salah period, then we have a procedure you need to follow. And then nearing expiry of the prescribed time for a ritual prayer. As we know, salah isn't done in 5 minutes. It's not a thing we have to do at a certain time. It is salah is something we have to do in a time period. So, for example, when the dhuhr enters at around 12 and exits at around 2, so you've got 2 hours more or less to do dhuhr in the winter in the UK. So during these 2 hours, so immediately at the beginning of dhuhr, ablution isn't fard upon you because you've still got another 2 hours to pray. But when you're nearing the time that you're about to miss dhuhr, for example, let's say you've got about 15 or 10 minutes left, then it becomes fard upon you to immediately get up and get wudu. Wudu becomes fard upon you and pray your salah. So this is the conditions for it to be obligatory upon a person. Now, for the ablution to be valid, there are other conditions. One, the areas which are specified for washing are completely covered by the purifying substance. Okay, whether that be water or in tayammum, dry ablution, that is wiping with a hand which has hit the soil. So it needs to completely be covered, so much so that you cannot leave, in the example of water, you cannot leave even a pin drop or a needle head amount dry on the parts that need to be washed. 2, for the one who is not legally excused. So remember, what does legally excused mean? So when somebody is unable to get wudu because they're constantly bleeding, for example, or they have another situation. So for the one who is not legally excused, absence of that which prohibits purity, like a menstrual period, postnatal lochia, or ritual impurity. So this is the same condition as up here. So these two conditions have to be met. When you're washing a part which needs to be washed, it needs to be washed completely, 100%, not 99.99%. It needs to be 100% washed. The legal ruling of purification is that it is obligatory, which means fard, for the ritual prayer, so for the 5 daily prayers, and mandatory, which means wajib, for circumambulating the Kaaba, so doing tawaf, it's wajib. Some scholars opine that it is also mandatory for touching the Quran, so they say it's wajib for touching the Quran, but many other scholars say that it is fard to touch the Quran with wudu. Ablution is sunnah for sleeping and recommended, mandub, after lying as in telling a fib, backbiting, laughing out loud, outside of the laughing out loud. Of course, if you laugh inside prayer, your ablution breaks. But if you laugh outside of prayer, then it's mustahab mandub for you to get wudu again. And after reciting vile poetry, this could obviously, nowadays in our time, no one reads poetry. What they do is they sing songs. So if you sing a song about something vile, then you should get wudu. It is also recommended to remain in a state of perpetual ablution and to perform ablution in order to avoid disagreement amongst scholars. So it is also recommended that you're always in wudu. So your intention might not be that I have to pray. You might have already prayed, but because your wudu broke or you lost your wudu, you go get wudu again. This is recommended. And then this last part, pay attention to this one, because you'll find this in also the other madhahib. You'll find this in also the other madhabs. So this is if, for example, in the Hanafi madhab, touching a woman doesn't nullify your wudu, your ablution. Neither does eating camel meat. It does not nullify your ablution in the Hanafi madhab. However, because it nullifies your ablution in the other madhahib, because Imam Shafi'i said it nullifies your wudu, or Imam Malik said it nullifies your wudu, it is in the Hanafi madhab recommended to go get wudu again. Even though according to our madhab, it doesn't nullify it, but we have respect for the other madhahibs and we respect their opinions, And we say that the Imam Shafi'i wasn't a layman, Imam Malik wasn't a layman, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, they weren't laymen. So if they gave a ruling, that ruling had to be taken seriously. Even though we disagree, we take the ruling seriously enough that wherever possible, we try to follow all four madhabs at the same time. So this is part of our madhab. So following the other madhabs where possible is part of the Hanafi madhab. The obligatory integrals, so what we call the rukun, the arkan, the pillars, the obligatory integrals are of purification are washing, wiping, and removing filth. So when we're talking about purification in general, we're not talking about wudu here, we're talking about in general purification. When we're talking about general purification, what we're talking about is this could be meat, this could be clothes, this could be wudu, this could be ghusl, this could be many other things. Okay, so there are three ways in which we purify things in Islam, right? We either wash things, we either wipe things, or we remove filth from things. Okay, the means of attaining purification are, and there are a couple ways of purifying something. There are a couple things we use to purify something. One of them is obviously water. Another one is soil. A third one is rubbing. And a fourth one is slaughtering. So there are four means in which we can purify things. Slaughtering according to the methods of sacred law, of course, and other means, as mentioned in the section of the methods of purification, that's going to come in the future. So there are other means, but right now we're talking about water and soil and rubbing when it comes to dry ablution. The four obligatory integrals of ablution. So now that we've understood all of this, how do we get wudu? What is the absolute necessary things we have to do for our wudu to be accepted or not, right? So washing the face once. Remember, once, because 3 times is sunnah. Washing the face once. So what is the face? We need to define the face. Is the face just here? Does it include your eyebrows? Does it include your forehead? Does it include your hairline? Does it include your ears? Right? Does it include your chin? What about below the chin? What about further back? So what is the face? We need to define it. In height, the face is defined as a starting point of the forehead surface. So we call your hairline, right? To the bottom of the chin, right? So not here, but to the bottom. So slightly past to make sure. And in width, it is what is between the earlobes, right? So this part here also has to be washed. Not the earlobe, but this part here also has to be washed. Okay, many people forget that. They do it up to their beards, but sometimes they may forget this area here. So when we take it like that, we can draw a line, a circle from our hairline to our first earlobe, right? And then from our first earlobe to the bottom of the chin, from the bottom of the chin to our other earlobe, and back up to our forehead. So all of this would be considered our face. And it doesn't say it here, but whenever you look at somebody's face, whatever you see naturally in its resting position has to be washed. What does that mean? That means your lips need to be washed a little bit inside. Because when I rest my face, you can see these, right? These have to be washed. When I rest my face, you can see nostrils. Nostrils have to be washed, right? Inside is sunnah. But this is part of the face. All of this, part of the face. Okay, so whenever you look at somebody and their face is resting, so that means their lips aren't like this. or they're not opening their mouth, right? Just the resting face, whatever you can see, obviously with the mouth closed, but slightly closed. All of that needs to be washed. So this is part of the face. You cannot completely skip your lips when washing your face. And then washing the arms up to and including the elbows. So when we say arms, I like to add hands, arms up to and including the elbows. So the hands are obviously fard, they're part of your arms. So in Arabic, we have one word for all of it. But because in English, we don't have that word, we usually say arms, but the hands. So everything, including your fingers, your hand, your wrist, your arm, and your elbow, all of this needs to be washed. We've got a question. Do we still need to wet the inside of the lips and nose when washing our face if we already washed our mouth and nose before? No, you don't. As long as you've already washed it, obligation-wise, you don't have to. But while washing your face, it's almost impossible to avoid your nose and lips anyways. But it's just something that some people, when they wash their face, they close their mouth too tight. So they do this and they wash their face. But this needs to get wet. So what we're actually trying to say here is also your eyes, right? If you close your eyes too tight when washing your face, these parts won't get wet. You'll get wrinkles in the skin. So you'll get wrinkles in the skin if you close your eyes too hard, right? This part won't get wet properly, right? So you obviously are going to close your eyes when washing your face, but not too tight. Same with the mouth. You're not going to wash your face with your mouth open, but also you need to make sure that you're not closing your lips too tight. That's what we're trying to say here. So we said washing the hands, arms, including the elbows. Again, one time. Washing the feet, both feet, up to and including the ankle bones, right? You need to include them, so go past them when washing. And then 4, wiping. Remember we said washing, wiping and removing filth. So 3 things we wash, 1 thing we wipe, and that is 1/4 of the head that is above the ears once. Okay? So any hair that is long, right, and hangs below the ears, we don't count that. Okay? It needs to be the hair above. So here, this area here. Right? All of that, you just need to do 1/4 of it. Now, don't be stingy, don't be weird. There's a lot of people, they read this, and then when they're getting wudu, you see them, they do everything so nicely, and then they just do this with their hair. Now, who knows if that's 1/4 or not? Like, you've done everything so nicely. Why not just take the extra half a second to just move your hand a bit further back? Do half of your hair instead of 1/4. Just because we said 1/4 is fard doesn't mean you should absolutely never do more than 1/4. Some people are weird. So when getting wudu, make sure you get it properly. I've seen a lot of people, they lift up the topi with one hand, they just do this and then they close it. Like, inshallah, that's more than 1/4, but what's the point of taking that risk? And then we have washing all the outer hair of a thick beard. So if your beard is thick, you can't get to the skin of the face, right? So we count the outer of the beard as part of the face. It's defined as one where the skin beneath it is not visible. This is one way to define it. You can also define it as where the water is unable to penetrate it easily. Obviously, if you were to sit there blasting water at it, you'd eventually get there. But when normally it's the water just stays on top. Except hair hanging outside the perimeter of the face. So if we were to imagine a hair, right? So obviously there's going to be more than one hair, but we're talking about an example here. So there's one hair, let's say, that starts on my face. It's so long that it stretches down to here, right? So where's the perimeter of my face? Here. So I have to wash that hair up to here. I don't have to go past it, because that's outside the perimeter of my face. That's no longer fard. So, except the hair hanging outside the perimeter of the face. And washing all the skin of a thin beard. Now, if your beard is thin, mine is thin on the sides, then you need to get down to the skin. But if it's thick, like down here, then obviously you can't get down to the skin. You just wash the top of the beard like this. And washing all the skin of a thin beard is a practical obligation, farda amali. Farda amali means basically you need to do it to be able to do the fard properly. So it's not in itself mentioned in the Quran, maybe, but practically it's farda amali. We call it practically it's fard. So what does that mean? The Quran ayah says your faces. It doesn't say your beards, but your beards are on your faces. So what happens is you have to wash your beard. So that's what we would call a farda amali, where the ayah says one thing, but it's kind of impossible to do without this other thing. So that becomes farda amali, even though the ayah didn't mention it. It becomes farda amali. The same applies obviously for the mustache, your eyebrows, right? If your eyebrows are really thick and water doesn't get past, that's fine. You just wash the top of your eyebrows. And the soul patch is this part here, right below the chin. Sorry, right below the lip, this part here. They don't count it as part of the beard, because by definition the beard grows on the jaw. And because this doesn't grow on the jaw, this grows on the soft spot here between the lip and the jaw. We call that something else, a soul patch. If the nails have grown so long that they cover the front of the fingertips now, then it's wajib, right? Mandatory for you to wash underneath them. Right? If the nails have grown long and cover the fingertips, preventing water from reaching below the nails, it is mandatory to wash what is beneath. Obviously, you have to make sure that there's nothing that prevents the water. If there is something under your nails which is preventing the water from getting there, then your wudu isn't valid. So, if your nails are long, and women do nowadays have long nails, right? You need to wash under your nails also. If you've put a varnish on your nails, or I don't know what it's called, I think it's called a varnish, nail varnish, the paint on your nails, that is going to put a coating on top of the nail, which stops water from touching it. But because your nail is part of your hand, and your hand is part of your arm, right? All of that is obligatory to wash. So what you can do, well, when I say what you can do is obviously if you're in the confines of your own home, is you can have those fake nails where you can take them off, get your wudu and put them back on if you're really into having those nails. But otherwise, you cannot put that nail varnish on your nails on the days that you need to pray. You can do it on the days that you don't have to pray, because obviously you don't need wudu. What did we say? Wudu is only fard because of salah. If you don't have salah, then you don't need to get wudu. So neither ablution nor wiping of the head is repeated after shaving the head or the beard. So this is a misconception that some people have. They think that if I've gotten wudu and then I cut my hair, because I've wiped that hair, but now I've cut it off, I haven't wiped what's beneath. They have the misconception that they need to wipe their hair again, and that's not true. Shaving your head completely, cutting off your beard, will not affect your ablution at all. Just as washing the respective area of the body or ablution is not repeated after shaving the mustache and eyebrow or trimming nails or pulling off skin, none of these things affect your ablution. You don't have to wash those areas again. So this was the fard of wudu. What does this mean? What did we not include? Right? Think of it this way. So we said you need to wash your face, you need to wash your arms, your feet, and we said you also need to wipe at least a quarter of your head. What did we not include? We did not include intention. What does that mean? That means you can unintentionally, by accident, get wudu in the Hanafi madhab. You can accidentally get wudu. What does that mean? If you fall into a well, if you go swimming. So you went swimming, you got out, you heard the adhan. This happened to me in Turkey one time. In fact, I got into a debate with my father over it because he thought that you needed intention. But I told him, we're Hanafi, we don't need intention. I was swimming in the sea, and then we heard the adhan. So we're going to go to the mosque and pray. I'm walking straight into the mosque. My dad says, you don't have wudu. I say, of course I have wudu. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I was just in the sea. I went completely under the water. All of the fard areas have been washed. He goes, but you didn't make intention. I said, it's not. And if you madhab, you can get wudu by accident. He's right. I didn't have any intention of getting wudu. But in the Hanafi madhab, you don't need an intention. In the other madhabs, you do though. So what we didn't mention, one was intention. Another one is the order. So if you started with your feet and ended with your face, right? This would not nullify, or it would be accepted. Neither did we say time. You can, for example, obviously this isn't going to be allowed, but just for the sake of example, if somebody washed their face in the morning and then in the afternoon washed their arms, and then in the late evening did their hair and feet, they could just pray Maghrib, right? But obviously you would have missed a bunch of salahs by then. But just for the sake of example, you could wash your face. 10 minutes later, you could go wash your arms. 10 minutes later, you could wipe your head. And then another 10 minutes later, you could do your feet. And then you would have ablution according to us. Obviously, if there's nothing that happened in between, that would nullify your ablution. So if there nothing happened in between, like you didn't go to the toilet in between or you didn't bleed, this would be allowed. So this is another thing we didn't mention during the fard, because it's not fard in the Hanafi madhab. Another one, we didn't say you have to rub your body, right? We didn't say you have to do it 3 times. When we said the hair, we only said a quarter. So this is what the fard is. This is what the absolute minimum you have to do to get wudu. Obviously, is this how you should be getting wudu? No, absolutely not. Because you're missing out like 20 different sunnahs. If you just get wudu by washing your feet first, and then 1 time, and then your arms 1 time, and then your face 1 time, and then doing only a quarter of your head, you're missing about 20 sunnahs that you could have done. Right? The sunnahs of ablution. Commencing ablution with the intention. So for the Hanafis, it's sunnah, not fard. Commencing ablution with the intention to perform an act of obedience not lawful except in the state of purification. Don't get confused. This just means anything that you're not allowed to do without wudu. So, praying, touching the Quran, but it has to be an act of worship. Praying, what else? Tawaf, and so on and so forth. So, you need to have the intention that I'm making intention to get wudu to allow me to pray, to allow me to do tawaf and things like that. Or to intend purification, removing ritual impurity. Or you can say, I'm getting wudu to get rid of, or you can say, I'm getting ablution, I'm getting wudu to get rid of ritual impurity, to get rid of hadath. You can use the Arabic word, hadath. I'm getting wudu to get rid of the hadath. Or to obey a command of the lawgiver, okay? Or to obey a command of the lawgiver. Lawgiver here means shari' in Arabic. We can normally, obviously, the original shari', the shari' is Allah Ta'ala. He's the one that makes the laws, right? But many a times this title is used for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because we get our laws from him. So we call him the lawgiver, even though the laws are Allah's laws. But he's the Prophet, he's the one that brings it to us. So when we say shari', many a times we do mean the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So to follow one of the commands of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, touching the Quran, right? It's a command to not touch the Quran unless you have wudu. So to be able to touch the Quran, you can make that intention. All of these intentions, whichever one you make, it's sunnah. And then you commence by mentioning the name of Allah, by saying Bismillah, and washing the hands up to and including the wrists 3 times. So why does it say here, and this is why I emphasize that fact in the beginning, when we said arms, I included hands. Because if you were to read this, you would think that washing your hands is a sunnah, right? That's literally what it says here. The sunnahs of ablution, you mention the name of Allah and you wash your hands. So somebody could come and they could say washing the hands is a sunnah. That's what the Hanafi book says, no? But what we say is no. Washing the hand is a fard. Washing it first is sunnah. And washing it 3 times is sunnah. Understood? So we start with washing the hands. Starting by washing the hands is sunnah. Washing the hands 3 times is sunnah. But washing the hands is fard. You cannot do wudu if your hands are completely dry afterwards, right? You haven't somehow you've managed to get wudu without getting water touching your hands. That is obviously not allowed. So that's why I made the emphasis that when we say arms, we also include the hands and include the elbow. 3, we're talking about the sunnahs, remember. Using a toothstick, a miswak, thrice when rinsing the mouth and moistening it with fresh water each time. So you go right to left and then you clean it, and then again right to left, and then clean it, and then right to left. You don't go completely detailed because it's not the time and place actually. You just you're getting the sunnah done. In the absence of a toothstick, or for someone who is toothless, a piece of coarse cloth or a finger is used in its place. You could also use a toothbrush, anything that's just going to clean the teeth. Similarly, for a woman, using mastic with an intention of obedience carries the same reward as the toothstick, even if she is able to use the toothstick. The reason we say it's different to women, for women, the ruling here is because in the Hanafi madhab, blood nullifies your ablution, and usually women have softer gums, so they're more prone to bleeding when they use the miswak. So that's why we recommend for the women who do have soft gums to not use the miswak, because if you start bleeding, then what's the whole point? Like every time you get wudu, you make yourself bleed. Now you can't get wudu. It's going to be difficult. That's why we say you can use something else with the intention of the miswak, something softer, right? This is also one of the reasons why Hanafis, we don't use the miswak just before prayer. The Shafi'is, they do that. Right before prayer, they use the miswak and then they start praying. Because for them, even if their tooth bled, their wudu isn't nullified. But for the Hanafis, if we were to use a miswak right before salah, it's possible that our teeth would bleed. And so that would cause a problem. And also, we take the position that when we're talking about miswak before salah, we understand it to mean ablution, wudu. And also some people find it disliked to use miswak in front of other people because it's a cleanliness thing. It's like blowing your nose, something similar to this. They say using a miswak in front of somebody else. Some people say it's disliked. Others say it's completely fine. It's a sunnah. So because of these, the Hanafis, we use the miswak when we're getting wudu for salah, but we don't use it. And that doesn't mean you can't. This just means that once you see a Hanafi and they're not using the miswak before salah, understand this is the reason. Right? This doesn't mean you can't. You can always do a sunnah from another madhab for no reason at all. Like you don't even need the reason. Okay? If for example, the Shafi'i madhab or the Hanbali madhab or the Maliki madhab says that this thing is a sunnah, and there's nothing in your madhab preventing you from doing it, right? So your madhab doesn't say that it's haram, it doesn't say that it's makruh, right? Then of course you can go ahead and do that sunnah. No questions asked. That's why we have different tasbihat after salah. Like in Turkey, you have two different tasbihat. The Hanafis, they do a shorter one, but we say Hanafis, but actually it's just a shorter one and a longer version. The longer version is taken from Imam Shafi'i's, well, the Shafi'i madhab's understanding of the ahadith. Theirs is longer. They're more generous with with how they take their tasbihat. But the Hanafis, I believe, the reason being is they're more strict on which hadiths they take. They have a shorter tasbihat. But there's nothing stopping a Hanafi, and we do this all the time, from just doing the longer tasbihat after salah. Why? Because there's nothing preventing us from taking those ahadiths and acting upon them, even though some may be weak, some may be ahad and weak. They might not be sahih hadith, but you don't need a sahih hadith to do something which is a dhikr. You don't need the ayah to openly tell you exactly which dhikr to do, right? So these are the reasons that thingies change. But Hanafis, our miswak is done during wudu. Shafi'is, they do it straight before salah. So right before they take takbir, they take the miswak out, they'll brush their teeth, put it back in, and do their takbir. Hanafis, we do it during ablution. We don't usually do it before salah, but we can if we wanted to. There's nothing stopping you. Of course, if you bleed though, your ablution's gone. You have to go get wudu again after it stops bleeding. So rinsing the mouth and nose 3 times, using fresh water for each rinse, and unless one is fasting, doing it the utmost to let water reach as much of the mouth and nostrils as possible. Okay? So the mouth and nose, they're sunnah. Doing them 3 times is sunnah. And if you're not fasting, do it properly. Right? If you are fasting, be careful. Because if water goes from your nose down to your throat, your wudu is invalid. If it goes from your, obviously from your mouth down to your throat, again your fasting is invalid. If one is not in a state of ihram, pilgrim sanctity, so when you go to Umrah and you put on the 2 cloths, combing a thick beard with wet fingers and running wet fingers in between the fingers and toes. So if you're not in the state of ihram, which we're not, like, you do this is another sunnah when getting wudu. So they say to do it both ways, so like this and like this way. So you wash your face and then you do this in between your beards. 6, washing each limb completely 3 times. Again, washing each I'm not happy with how some of these are written. So the word completely here is wrong. Why? Because there's nothing about completely which is sunnah. Completely is fard. Washing it 3 times is sunnah. Okay? So washing each limb completely is fard. 3 times is sunnah. Okay? Wiping all the head and ears with 1 quantity of water. Why does it say this? Don't waste water. You can do all of your head and your ears and your nape with 1 quantity of water. So you wet your hands. You do like this. These 3 fingers and your palms, they go on your head. You go all the way back and then push it back forward. So these we've used. These 2 we haven't used, and the back of our hands we haven't used. So with these 2, right, You do your ears like that. So now the front faces of all of our hands, both of our hands have been used, but we haven't used the back. And then you get the back like this. Your nape, not your throat. Your nape, you do it like that. But not like this. Like this. Not like this. Like this. Okay? Because this part is the throat. It's makruh to do this part. Only your nape, only the back part. So you go sideways like that. So you only have to wet your hands once. You can do your whole head, your ears, and your nape all in one. Go. Washing each limb in the correct order. Remember we said the order isn't fard. For us, it's sunnah. Washing each limb in the correct order is sunnah, including between rinsing the mouth and nose. Okay? So even, like, you can't start with your nose and your mouth. That, for the sunnah. Again, technical difficulties. Give me a moment. Not sure why it's doing this today. Continuity in washing. So remember when we said you could wash your face and then 10 minutes later you could wash your arms and then like 10 minutes later you could wash your hair. So not doing that is sunnah. So doing it one after the other is sunnah. And so what is what we call, so what's the limit? So at what point, like how long are you able to wait after washing your face that it's still considered continuity? Or how long do you wait until it's considered not continuity? Right? And we say long enough that on a normal day it would have dried up. So about a couple minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes, right? Because after 3-4 minutes of wudu, your face gets dry, your arms get dry, right? So so about 3-4 minutes in between each thing. So what that means is, so let's say you're getting wudu, right? And then your doorbell rings, the postman's here, and we all know how the postmen are. If you don't answer within like 10 seconds, they're gone. So you need to run to the door every time they ring the doorbell. So you're washing your face, let's say, and then the doorbell rings. You know, if I don't run now, I'll never get this package. So you're allowed there to go, grab the package, put it away, close the door, lock the door, come back. That's still considered continuity. Why? Because that's not long enough for your face to dry, right? Number 10, rubbing washed limbs. So remember we said wetting it is fard. Rubbing it is sunnah. If obviously there is something on your arm which is stopping water from getting there unless you rub it, then rubbing would become fard. And then not wasting water. So why do we say not wasting water is a sunnah? Because the opposite of a sunnah, remember? So not wasting water, what does that mean? That means the opposite of a sunnah would be a makruh. But since when did wasting water become makruh and not haram? So, question. Why did we include this in the sunnahs? Why did we not include this in somewhere else? The answer being is actually if it's your own water, well, if it's flowing water, then, and I believe that it's going to say this in the ahead, if it's flowing water, so you've got abundance of water, and you own the water, or it's just like a river or something, then it's sunnah to not waste it, even though it's like a river. Okay? If we're talking about the masjid, wasting water in the masjid is absolutely haram. So we're talking about here, again, there's only like so much you can write without the book getting too long. So that's why it's not written here, even though the obviously the scholar knows this. So we're talking about water which is in abundance and it's flowing, or it's owned by you. If it's your own water, then we consider that makruh. But if it's the waqf's water, if it's the masjid's water, and you waste it, then it becomes haram. And then we have the mustahab acts of ablution. I'm going to read these really fast because we've read the sunnahs. Now these are all mustahabs. There's a bunch you can do. I'm going to read these quite fast so we can carry on. Wiping the back of the neck but not the throat. Okay. Mustahab to wipe the nape. We call it nape. Facing the direction of prayer while getting wudu. Inserting the small finger into the ear holes. So I showed you like this, but it's been said to be done like this. Okay, so like this. Unless one is legally excused to perform ablution prior to the prayer's prescribed time. Okay, so if you're in a normal state, you should get wudu before the adhan. Don't wait until the adhan. Don't wait for the time to go in. Get wudu before the time. It's mustahab. Not using too little water. Okay, you shouldn't use too little water because you risk not getting wudu properly. The intention be present in all the actions of ablution. So to constantly renew your intention while getting wudu. With each action you should have the intention of getting wudu. Performing ablution in a pure place. Okay, you don't have to, but if you can, obviously it's the best. Protecting one's garments from the drops of used water. Okay, so it's not fard, it's not makruh, it's nothing. It's just mustahab, good thing to do. If you can protect your garments from the drops of used water, that's a nice thing you can do. Not seeking the help of a third person to wash, of another person to wash or wipe the limbs. As for pouring, drawing or bringing water, this is not disliked, even if it's requested by the one performing ablution. So to have somebody help you, and when I say help you, like rub your arm for you, or rub your face for you, we don't like this. Okay, we say it's mustahab to not have this happen. But if someone's pouring water for you, that's fine. If someone's bringing water for you, that's fine. Okay, these are normal things. But what's not normal is someone rubbing your arm for you or rubbing your face for you, right? That's not normal. Number 10, drinking from the water left over after ablution. So we're not talking about the water that drips off from you. We're talking about the water left in the bucket, okay, or from the tap. While standing, remember normally we always say sit down and drink. There are two places that I know of where you're supposed to stand and drink. One is Zamzam water, and another one is after you've finished your wudu from the tap. You stand facing the Qibla and you drink that water while standing and facing the direction of prayer. Similarly, one drinks water from the well of Zamzam standing, yes, right there. Rubbing the feet with the left hand, okay, mustahab. So if you use the right hand, can we say makruh? No. Remember, what's the opposite of mustahab? Nothing. It's jaiz. You can do it. But there are some who have called it makruh. In winter, to wet the limbs, washed in ablution with water, in the same way oil is applied. Thereafter, one pours water onto the limbs. Not sure why, but let's say you have oil in your hands and you were to put oil on your arms. How would you do it? You would rub the water like this, right? And then like this, and then you would just like slowly apply the water. And then just pour the water over. Not sure why. Maybe if we go down, it'll say. And then there are a bunch of other desirable acts. Okay. So it doesn't say why. I'm not sure there's a reason to this. It must be to do with, obviously, the cold. Something to do with the cold. But either way, that's one way you can do it. And then we have makruh acts. Striking the face or another limb with water, so splashing the water onto yourself. So getting the water and just hammering it onto your face. Wasting water is somewhat disliked if one is using flowing water and knows that using excessive amounts of water is not sunnah. If one deems it to be sunnah, then it is prohibitively disliked. Tahriman makruh. Okay, so what does this mean? This means that if you are somebody who holds the position that it is not sunnah, then it's makruh tanzihan for you to waste the water. If we are to take the opinion that it is sunnah to not waste the water, okay, then it would be tahriman makruh. Okay, why does it say this? So that means on this subject there's two different opinions, and each opinion would have a different outcome. As for wasting appropriated, so waqf water, so from the masjid, used for purification, for example, water in a large container, tank, or large jug, it is unlawful, right? Haram. Why? Because it's not yours, it's the masjid's. Number 3, wiping 3 times with fresh water is makruh. Right? What does that mean? That means wiping your hair 3 times with fresh water. Right? We're talking about the makruh acts. So you shouldn't splash the water on your face. You shouldn't waste the water. And you shouldn't, again, because this is considered wasting water, right? Even though it might not be much water, it's an unnecessary act which is not part of wudu. The Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, right? He didn't wet his hands 3 times and wipe his hair 3 times. That's why we say it's makruh. It goes against what the Prophet ﷺ used to do. So not every act has to be an evil act for it to be considered makruh. It just needs to go against what the Prophet ﷺ did. And then we can move on to what nullifies the wudu. And I think we'll stop here. It's been about an hour. We'll stop here because this is one of the important subjects. And I don't want to rush it, inshallah. So we'll end here. We are at page 48, basically 49. You can send in your questions now. And we'll answer them when we get the time, inshallah.